James Murray here, filling in for Paul on Paul Murray Live. We've got an absolute ton of stuff more to get through tonight from around the world and here at home. Now, joined here on the panel by Associate Editor at The Australian, Graham Lloyd, and from Adoni Media, Leisa Goddard. Let's get into it. First of all, both of you, welcome to the program. Let's go to the U.S., where the bar is, we've now seen the leader of the free world have this interview, and it was, I guess, a big victory for him in that he managed to get through a 22-minute, heavily edited, possibly scripted, who knows, television interview without completely destroying his campaign. Let's look at what he said, Joe Biden had to say, about fears that he doesn't have the mental capacity to go on for another 4 years.
Would you be willing to undergo an independent medical evaluation that included neurological and cognitive tests and release the results to the American people?
Look, I have a cognitive test every single day. Every day I have that test. Everything I do. You know, not only am I campaigning, but I'm running the world.
And let's have a look here at what former Obama advisor David Axelrod had to say after the interview. Here's his review.
Well, the question is, did he change the minds of voters who were watching that? I don't really think so. You know, Jim, I think the thing, and some of it I found sad, but he seems not to be able to compute the fact that people have these questions about him. He said, when George Stephanopoulos asked him if he'd be willing to take a cognitive test, he said, I take a cognitive test every day. Well, the fact is that may be true, but 75% of the American people think he failed.
Graham Lloyd, let's start with you here. Do you think that after all of that, Joe Biden's up to it? And as a journalist, if you were sitting there and Joe Biden is giving you what he would call malarkey about a cognitive test, well, why don't you start running a cognitive test with him? Ask him to spell his name backwards, stuff like that.
Well, extraordinary times, isn't it, in the US president at the moment? And I think the best advice he could get would be to stop digging. The more he talks about it and the more he is trying to justify the situation, the worse he looks and the more he undermines his credibility. It is not unusual for older people to have a cognitive test. It's quite a normal thing. He should leap at the opportunity to demonstrate that he can do so, which I think Donald Trump, in fact, did that during his presidency when the Democrats were asking all these same questions about him and putting him on the spot. Biden really needs to demonstrate that he is competent and he can stay the distance. Everything he's doing now really detracts from that impression.
Now, Leisa, I want to throw this one out at you here. It's a bit of a contrarian thought, but we're starting to see some polls here in swing states where the race is starting to narrow. Biden is starting to gain on Trump. Is there a chance that all of this talk about the race for people who aren't switched on is focusing them, and for people out there who just hate Trump, they're suddenly now more focused, and the Democrats could actually get a bit of their base fired up around this issue?
You would have to be living under a rock in the US if you were not across the fiasco that is the president right now. So he talks about a cognitive test. He fails a cognitive test nearly every time he's out in public. Never mind a physical test of walking up steps. So, you know, you could just tick them off. A doctor would have a field day with those. But the fact that he got to the point of when I was asked of, you know, if you do end up running and you do lose to Donald Trump, you know, how will you feel? How will you feel about that? And he was just completely, he didn't buy into it at all. He does not accept, I don't think, that he has a problem, full stop, end of day. And when he refers to the fact of, well, it'll be up to God, that will be the only time that he will stand down. Well, it says an awful lot, doesn't it?
Well, I mean, it sounds like a Far Side cartoon waiting to happen, just challenging God to take him out of the race. But Graham Lloyd here, you know, we are starting to get some real information about what the actual nature of this problem could be, because the New York Post has had this extraordinary bit of reporting where they've found that a top expert in Parkinson's disease, a guy who's been in this game for decades from the Walter Reed Medical Center, has been visiting the White House and talking to Joe Biden's personal physician. I mean, surely if this is the case, we have the right to know, the American people, but also the world, his allies, their allies here in Australia. This can't go on. It's a dangerous world we're seeing. I mean, what must China and Russia be thinking at the moment?
Well, they would be looking at this and they would be seeing a weakness and distraction on the part of the United States. And anybody who has had elderly relatives can see and understand what cognitive decline is and what it looks like. And certainly looking at Joe Biden's performance in the debate, you could see that he had that faraway stare, he was distracted, and it's not unreasonable to think that there is some degenerative thing going on. And those around him really should be the ones who step in and say, for his own dignity, it's time to really pass the baton.
Yeah, hey, look, and I mean, I think that all of us agree that if this was a relative of one of ours, we'd be having some pretty tough conversations. You certainly wouldn't be letting him drive.